The day my father's will was read, I wore his favorite sweater. It still smelled like his cologne, a scent that had always meant safety and home. I never imagined it would become the armor I'd wear on the day my sister destroyed our family. I'm Caitlin, and this is the story of how betrayal became my stepping stone to success. Is this some kind of joke? I gripped the edge of the mahogany conference table, staring at the lawyer across from me. The document in front of me couldn't be real. There must be a mistake. I assure you, Ms. O'Brien, everything is in order. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, his expression carefully neutral. Your father's entire estate, including the family business, has been left to your sister Valerie. I turned to look at Valerie, who sat beside me with a practiced look of sympathy on her face. The same face she'd worn at Dad's funeral 3 days ago. Val, you knew about this? My voice cracked. Did you know all along? She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Katie, Daddy just wanted what was best for the family business. You know how impulsive you can be with money? Impulsive? I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. I worked alongside Dad every day for the past 5 years while you were off finding yourself in Europe. Please, let's keep this civil. The lawyer interjected, but I barely heard him. Tell them about the conversation we had last Christmas, I demanded, my hands shaking. Tell them how Dad promised we'd run the company together. Valerie's face hardened slightly. People change their minds, Katie. Daddy changed his in the end. He knew I had the better head for business. I laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the sterile conference room. The better head for business? You haven't worked a day in your life. That's enough. Valerie stood, smoothing her designer dress. I know you're upset, but this is what Daddy wanted. I'm sure we can find you a position in the company somewhere. Maybe in HR? The condescension in her voice made my blood boil. This was the same sister who used to braid my hair and share her ice cream with me on hot summer days. Now she stood before me, a stranger wearing familiar skin. I don't want your charity, I spat, gathering my things. Keep it all. Keep every last penny. As I reached the door, Valerie called out, Don't be dramatic, Katie. Where are you even going to go? I turned back one last time, meeting her eyes. Watch me, Val. Just watch me. Outside, the autumn air hit my face like a slap. I made it halfway to my car before my legs gave out, and I slumped against a nearby tree. My phone buzzed, a message from Layla. How did it go? Want me to come over? I typed back quickly. Meet me at Adrian's office instead. I need to talk to him. 20 minutes later, I sat in Adrian's modest consulting firm, pouring out the whole story. He listened quietly, his years of experience evident in his thoughtful expression. So what now? He asked when I finished. What's your next move? I don't know, I admitted, wiping away angry tears. I always thought family meant something. That blood was thicker than water. It is. Adrian leaned forward, his eyes intense. But sometimes it's also more poisonous. The question isn't what Valerie did, it's what you're going to do about it. I want to prove her wrong, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I want to show her that I'm not just the impulsive little sister who needs looking after. Adrian smiled, reaching for his laptop. Then let's make a plan. I've been watching you work with your father's company for years, Caitlin. You have instincts that can't be taught. But I have nothing, I protested. No capital, no connections. You have me, he interrupted. And you have something more valuable than money. You have motivation. Sometimes the best businesses are built not from opportunity, but from necessity. As Adrian pulled up a blank business plan template, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, raw and bleeding, but alongside it grew something else. Determination. One day, I promised myself silently, Valerie's going to realize what she threw away. And when that day comes, I'll be ready. I pulled Dad's sweater tighter around me, inhaling that familiar scent one last time. Then I straightened my shoulders and turned to Adrian's screen. Okay, I said. Let's begin. 6 months of rejection letters had taught me one thing. Starting over is a special kind of hell. I sat in my tiny rented office space, staring at yet another thanks but no thanks email when Layla burst through the door. You need to see this. She thrust her phone in my face, nearly knocking over my coffee. It was an article about Valerie's latest business acquisition, a luxury yacht charter company in Miami. The photo showed her smiling on deck, champagne in hand, wearing what looked like half my old yearly salary on her wrist. Delete it, I said, turning back to my laptop. I don't need the distraction. You're right. Layla flopped into the chair across from me. So what's the plan for today, boss? I pulled up my presentation slides. Meeting with potential investors at 2. If I can just get one of them to believe in this concept, they will, she assured me. Your sustainable packaging idea is brilliant. Those big corporations are destroying the planet, and you're offering them a solution that actually saves them money. The phone rang, making us both jump. It was Adrian. Caitlin, are you sitting down? His voice crackled through the speaker. Why? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Remember that contact I mentioned? The one from the venture capital firm? He wants to meet. Today. My heart skipped. Today? Adrian, I'm not ready. My presentation still needs work and— Stop. He cut in. You've been ready for months. Get your materials together and meet me at the Capitol Grill in an hour. I hung up and looked at Layla in panic. Help me? For the next 45 minutes, we rehearsed my pitch until I could recite it in my sleep. As I gathered my things, Layla grabbed my arm. Wait. She pulled out her lipstick. War paint. You've got this. The restaurant was packed with lunch crowds when I arrived. Adrian waved me over to a corner table where he sat with a distinguished-looking man in his 50s. Caitlin, meet Robert. Robert, this is the young entrepreneur I told you about. Robert's handshake was firm. Adrian says you're going to revolutionize industrial packaging. That's the plan. I smiled, forcing confidence into my voice. Did you know that current packaging methods waste approximately 40% of materials during production? For the next hour, I laid out my vision. Robert asked tough questions, but I had answers ready. All those months of preparation were finally paying off. Impressive, he said finally, setting down his coffee. But tell me, why this? Why packaging of all things? I thought about lying, about giving some corporate-friendly answer. Instead, I told the truth. Because I watched my father's company waste millions on inefficient systems, and nobody would listen when I proposed changes. Now I have a chance to fix that. Not just for one company, but for an entire industry. Robert nodded slowly. And your father's company? They're not interested? They're under different management now. I met his gaze steadily. But I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm here because I know this idea works, and I'm ready to prove it. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Let's talk numbers. 2 hours later, I stood outside the restaurant, hands shaking as I called Layla. Well? She demanded. They're in, I whispered. $5 million in seed funding. Layla, they're actually in. Her scream made me hold the phone away from my ear. I'm coming over with champagne. We have to celebrate. That evening, as Layla and I sat on my apartment floor sharing cheap champagne, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Holly, a former colleague from my father's company. Heard about your funding round. Valerie won't be happy when she finds out you're becoming competition. Watch your back. I showed the text to Layla, who rolled her eyes. Delete it. She's just trying to get in your head. But as I stared at the message, something clicked. No, this is perfect. Let her tell Valerie. Let them all watch. Caitlin. Layla's voice held a warning note. I'm not doing this for revenge, I assured her, though part of me wondered if that was true. I'm doing it because I finally can, because I should have done it years ago. I raised my plastic cup. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, Layla echoed, and to showing them all what you're made of. As we clinked cups, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Adrian. Congratulations. Now the real work begins. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. He was right. This was just the beginning. But for the first time since that day in the lawyer's office, I knew exactly where I was headed. And Valerie? Well, she'd find out soon enough. 3 years can change everything. I stood at the podium of the National Business Innovation Conference, wrapping up my keynote speech about sustainable business practices. The same conference where, just a few years ago, I'd been nothing more than an attendee with big dreams. And that's how we reduced packaging waste by 60% across all our partner companies, I concluded. Thank you. The applause was thunderous. As I stepped down, Adrian met me backstage with a proud smile. Knocked it out of the park, kid. He handed me a water bottle. But heads up, Holly's here. Of course she is. I took a sip, scanning the crowd, probably gathering intel for her copycat product line. Speaking of intel, Adrian lowered his voice. Have you seen the news about Valerie? Before I could answer, Holly materialized beside us, wearing her signature predatory smile. Caitlin, fantastic speech. Almost as good as the one I gave last year. She air-kissed my cheek. We simply must catch up. Have you heard about your sister's little situation? Holly, I nodded coolly. Still riding on other people's innovations? Her smile tightened. Better than riding on Daddy's coattails. Oh wait, that would be Valerie, wouldn't it? Though not for much longer, from what I hear. She sashayed away, leaving me staring after her. Adrian touched my arm. You should probably see this. He pulled up a news article on his phone. The headline hit me like a punch. O'Brien Enterprises faces bankruptcy amid CEO's lavish spending. There's more. Adrian swiped through photos. That yacht company she bought? Sinking faster than the Titanic. And her husband Philip apparently cleaned out their joint accounts before filing for divorce. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, a complicated knot formed in my stomach. Ms. O'Brien? An event coordinator appeared. The press is ready for you. The next hour was a blur of interviews and photographs. I answered questions about my company's success, our expansion plans, the new headquarters we were building. Nobody mentioned Valerie, but I could feel the whispers following me. Later that evening, at the conference gala, Layla found me hiding by the dessert table. Stop stress-eating chocolate truffles and dance with me, she commanded, pulling me onto the dance floor. This is your moment. You're the youngest keynote speaker they've ever had. Did you know? I asked as we swayed to the music. About Valerie? I didn't want to distract you before your speech. She studied my face. How do you feel about it? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to celebrate, but she's still your sister, Layla finished. Our conversation was interrupted by my phone buzzing. An email from the charity foundation I'd started last year. Invitation to host annual fundraising gala. Perfect timing. Layla peered over my shoulder. You can show off that ridiculous mansion you just bought. It's not ridiculous, it's investment property. It has a fountain in the foyer. Before I could defend my real estate choices, Holly's voice cut through the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen. She clinked her glass, commanding attention. I have an exciting announcement. My company is launching a revolutionary new eco-friendly packaging line. My blood ran cold. The description she gave matched our upcoming product exactly, the one we hadn't announced yet. That snake, Layla hissed. She must have gotten her hands on our prototype designs. I felt eyes turning to me, waiting for my reaction. Instead of showing anger, I smiled and raised my glass. Congratulations, Holly, though you might want to check your numbers. That design you're describing? We patented it 6 months ago. The color drained from Holly's face as murmurs rippled through the crowd. Adrian appeared at my side, grinning. Already sent cease and desist letters to her office. Told you we should patent everything early. As Holly made a hasty exit, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. Katie, it's me. Can we talk? Please. My hands trembled as I showed the message to Layla. Valerie, she whispered. Are you going to respond? I stared at the screen, remembering the last time I'd seen my sister. The way she'd dismissed me, treated me like a child who needed managing. Not tonight, I decided, putting my phone away. Tonight we celebrate. But as the evening wore on, I couldn't shake the image of Valerie alone in that big empty house, watching her empire crumble. I thought of Dad, of what he would say if he could see us now. "Karma's a funny thing," Adrian said, appearing beside me with fresh champagne. "Question is, what are you going to do with it?" I took the glass, watching the bubbles rise. "I'm going to host that charity gala," I decided, "and I'm going to make sure everyone gets an invitation, including Valerie. The ice sculptures are melting." I paced the grand foyer of my mansion, phone pressed to my ear. "And the caterer's running late." "Breathe," Layla commanded through the speaker. "Everything's under control. I'm handling the caterer, and nobody cares about ice sculptures anyway." She was right, of course. The real reason for my anxiety had nothing to do with melting ice or late catering. It was the thought of seeing Valerie again after all these years. "Did she RSVP?" I asked, though I'd checked the list a dozen times. "Yes, and you know it. Now go get dressed. I'll be there in 20 minutes. 2 hours later, I stood greeting guests as they arrived for the charity gala. My home buzzed with Seattle's business elite, all here to support children's education, and perhaps catch a glimpse of the drama they'd been whispering about. Gorgeous event. Adrian appeared at my elbow, looking dapper in his tuxedo. Though I think the fountain in the foyer might be a bit much. "Not you two," I laughed, but the sound died in my throat as I caught sight of the entrance. Valerie stood in the doorway, almost unrecognizable. Gone were the designer dresses and diamond jewelry. She wore a simple black cocktail dress that had seen better days, her hair pulled back in a modest bun. But it was her eyes that struck me. The confident sparkle replaced by something haunted. "Showtime," Adrian murmured, squeezing my arm before disappearing into the crowd. Valerie approached slowly, clutching her purse like a shield. "Katie, thank you for inviting me." "Valerie." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Welcome." The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, she broke it. "Your home is beautiful," she said softly. "You've done well for yourself." "Yes, I have." I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "No thanks to Ms. O'Brien." A reporter from the Seattle Times approached with a photographer. "Could we get a photo of the hostess?" "Of course." I turned away from Valerie, plastering on my media smile. The evening progressed in a blur of speeches and donation pledges. I was announcing the final fundraising total when I noticed Valerie slip out onto the terrace. Against my better judgment, I followed her. She stood at the railing, staring out at the city lights below. "Remember when we used to share a bedroom?" she asked without turning around. "And we'd stay up late planning our futures?" "That was a long time ago. I've lost everything, Katie." Her voice cracked. "The company, the house, my marriage, Philip took it all." "I heard." I moved to stand beside her. "Karma's funny that way." She flinched. "I deserve that, but I need your help, please." "My help?" I laughed bitterly. "Like you helped me when Dad died?" I was wrong. She turned to face me, tears streaming down her face. "I was stupid and greedy and wrong. But I'm your sister. Were you my sister when you convinced Dad I couldn't handle the business? When you watched me walk away with nothing?" "That's not... I didn't..." She slumped against the railing. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Inside, the party continued. I could hear laughter, the clink of glasses, the sound of success I'd built from scratch. Everything I'd achieved because she'd left me no choice. "There's a position open," I heard myself say. "Entry level, cleaning staff." Valerie's head snapped up. "What? You want my help?" "Start at the bottom, like I did." I met her gaze steadily. "The job pays $15 an hour. Take it or leave it." "You want me to be your maid?" Her voice trembled between hurt and anger. "I want you to learn what it means to work for something." I turned to go back inside. "Think about it." "Katie, wait." She grabbed my arm. I'll do it. I stared at her, searching for signs of manipulation or deceit. But all I saw was desperation and something else. Shame. Be here Monday at 8 a.m. I pulled away gently. Don't be late. As I walked back into the gala, Layla intercepted me. I saw Valerie leave. Are you okay? She's starting work here on Monday, I said, grabbing a champagne flute from a passing waiter. As what? Layla's eyes widened as I told her. Holy shit, that's either brilliant or cruel. I'm not sure which. Neither am I. I watched the bubbles rise in my glass. But it feels like something needs to break before it can be fixed. Just be careful, Layla warned. Karma works both ways. I nodded, but my mind was already racing ahead to Monday morning, wondering if Valerie would actually show up. And if she did, what then? The answer would come sooner than I expected. Monday morning arrived with a surreal quality. I sat at my kitchen island, watching the security camera feed on my tablet as Valerie pulled up in a beat-up Honda Civic, a far cry from her usual luxury vehicles. You're really doing this? Layla asked, setting down a coffee mug beside me. She'd stayed over, claiming she needed to work on project files, but we both knew she was here for moral support. She's 3 minutes early, I noted, ignoring the question. The doorbell rang. Maria, my regular housekeeper, answered it. I'd briefed her yesterday about training the new hire, carefully avoiding any mention of our relationship. I switched to the foyer camera feed. Valerie stood awkwardly in jeans and a plain t-shirt, looking like a stranger in her own skin. I should go down, I said, not moving. No. Layla touched my shoulder. Let Maria handle it. That's what you'd do with any other new employee, right? She was right, but it didn't make it any easier to watch Maria hand my sister a uniform and lead her to the staff changing room. My phone buzzed. A text from Philip, Valerie's ex-husband. Heard you hired Val. Careful. She'll rob you blind like she did me. I showed the message to Layla, who snorted. Rich, coming from the guy who emptied their joint accounts. What really happened there? I asked. Adrian mentioned something about fraud. From what I heard, Philip was running a Ponzi scheme through their yacht business. When it started falling apart, he transferred everything to offshore accounts and disappeared. Left Valerie holding the bag with the investors. The irony wasn't lost on me. So she got played the same way she played me. Life's funny that way. Layla gathered her things for work. Just don't enjoy this too much, okay? After she left, I tried to focus on work emails, but my attention kept drifting to the security feeds. I watched Valerie follow Maria from room to room, learning to clean toilets and dust priceless artwork. Her hands shook as she carried cleaning supplies, and twice she had to stop to wipe tears. Around noon, my intercom buzzed. Ms. O'Brien? Maria's voice crackled through. The new girl cut her hand on some broken glass. Should I send her home? I closed my eyes, counting to 10. No, I'll handle it. Send her to the kitchen. Minutes later, Valerie appeared, cradling her hand. A bloody paper towel was wrapped around her palm. Sit. I pointed to a bar stool, pulling out the first aid kit. Let me see. It's fine, she mumbled. I can keep working. Valerie, sit down. She perched on the edge of the stool while I cleaned the cut. It wasn't deep, but it had bled quite a bit. Remember when you used to patch me up after I fell off my bike? She asked quietly. Remember when you used to look out for me instead of stabbing me in the back? Her face crumpled. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me? I pressed the bandage perhaps a little harder than necessary. By taking everything? Philip convinced me you'd run the company into the ground. She winced at the pressure. He said you were too idealistic, too focused on environmental initiatives instead of profit. I believed him because it was easier than admitting I was jealous. Jealous? Of what? Of how much Dad loved you. How proud he was of your ideas. She looked down at her bandaged hand. I was the older sister, but you were always his favorite. I stepped back, anger warring with an unexpected pang of sympathy. That's not true. Dad loved us both. Maybe. She stood up, straightening her uniform. But he respected you more. And now I know why. Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Adrian. "Turn on the business news," he said without preamble. Holly's company just announced bankruptcy. I grabbed the remote, switching on the kitchen TV. Sure enough, there was Holly, being escorted from her office building while reporters swarmed. "Turns out copying our patent wasn't her only illegal activity," Adrian continued. "She's been cooking the books for years." Valerie watched the screen, her expression unreadable. "That could have been me," she said softly. If I hadn't. "But it wasn't," I finished. "You lost everything, but at least you didn't lose your freedom." She nodded, then gestured to the cleaning supplies. "I should get back to work." As she turned to leave, I called after her. "Val, the cut? Keep it clean. Come back if it needs changing." A ghost of our old connection flickered between us. Fragile, barely there, but present. "Thanks, Katie." She paused at the door. "For everything." I watched her go, wondering if this strange experiment in revenge was turning into something else entirely. Something neither of us had expected. 2 weeks into our new arrangement, I found Valerie crying in the laundry room. She sat on an overturned basket, shoulders shaking, clutching a familiar blue sweater, Dad's sweater. "I didn't know you kept it," she whispered as I stood in the doorway. "I wear it sometimes," I said, "when I need to make big decisions." She tried to fold it, her hands trembling. "I found his reading glasses in his desk after everything. I still have them in my apartment. My tiny, horrible apartment." I should have walked away. Instead, I sat on another basket across from her. "How bad is it? Really?" "Bad." She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "The debt collectors call every day. I'm living off ramen noodles and my landlord's threatening eviction." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Adrian's message made my blood run cold. "Turn on the news now." I pulled out my tablet, Valerie peering over my shoulder as I opened a news stream. The headline blared, "Breaking, Philip arrested in Bali for international finance fraud." Oh God. Valerie's face went white. "They'll think I knew. The investors, the authorities, they'll think I was part of it." As if on cue, my phone exploded with notifications. Reporters wanting comments, business associates asking questions. "We need to get ahead of this," I said, already dialing Adrian. "Come with me." In my home office, Adrian was already on speakerphone with my PR team. "The press is going to be all over this," he warned. "They'll dig up everything. The inheritance, the company transfer, all of it." "Let them," I heard myself say. "We'll tell them the truth." "Katie, no." Valerie grabbed my arm. "You can't expose yourself like that. Your reputation." "We'll survive." I turned to her. "But we need to know everything. No more secrets." For the next 2 hours, Valerie laid it all bare. How Philip had manipulated her, using her insecurities about Dad's preferences to push his agenda. How he'd convinced her that taking control of the company was the only way to protect it from my risky environmental initiatives. He said Dad signed the new will voluntarily. She finished, her voice hoarse. I never knew about the forged documents until it was too late. Adrian's sharp intake of breath matched my own. "Forged documents?" "I found out 6 months ago. Philip bragged about it during a fight. Said Dad never actually changed the will. By then, everything was falling apart, and I was too ashamed to tell you." My head spun. All this time, Dad hadn't betrayed me after all. "We can fix this," Adrian said firmly. "But we need to move fast. Caitlin, are you willing to make a public statement supporting your sister?" "Yes," I said, surprising myself. "But on one condition." I turned to Valerie. "You come work for me. Not as cleaning staff, in the company. Starting at entry-level management, learning the business properly this time." "Why would you do that?" She looked stunned. "After everything?" Because you're my sister, and because Dad would have wanted us to work together, like we were supposed to all along. The press conference the next day was a circus. I stood at the podium, cameras flashing, and told our story. The manipulation, the fraud, the reconciliation. When I finished, Valerie stepped up beside me. My sister offered me a chance to earn back what I lost, she said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. Not just the business, but her trust. I don't deserve it, but I'm going to spend every day trying to. The headlines the next day were surprisingly positive. Sisters unite against fraud, family business redemption story, O'Brien sisters from rivalry to recovery. That evening, as we sat in my kitchen reviewing the media coverage, Layla arrived with takeout and a suspicious expression. "If this is another trick," she warned Valerie. "If you hurt her again—" "It's not," Valerie and I said simultaneously, then looked at each other in surprise. "Well, that's creepy," Layla muttered, but she was smiling as she unpacked the food. My phone buzzed, another message from Adrian. "Your father would be proud today." I looked at Valerie, who was carefully separating her broccoli from her beef, just like she used to do when we were kids. The anger I'd carried for so long felt lighter somehow, making room for something else. Something like hope. "Hey, Val," I said, reaching for the soy sauce. "Dad's old office is still empty. Think you could help me clean it out this weekend?" Her smile was watery but real. "I'd like that." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close. But it was a start. "Look what I found." Valerie's voice cracked as she pulled a dusty photo album from Dad's old desk drawer. We'd been cleaning his office all morning, sorting through years of memories and forgotten paperwork. "I haven't seen that in years," I said, wiping dust from the leather cover. Inside were photos of us as kids. Gap-toothed grins, matching Christmas dresses, birthday parties. "Wait." Valerie pulled out a yellowed envelope tucked between pages. "This is Dad's handwriting." My heart stopped as I read the date on the envelope. 2 weeks before he died. Inside was a letter written in Dad's familiar scrawl. "My dearest girls," Valerie read aloud, her voice trembling. "If you're reading this, something's gone wrong. The will I signed today doesn't reflect my true wishes. Philip insisted on changes that didn't feel right, but he's threatened to expose irregularities in our company's environmental compliance. He blackmailed Dad?" I grabbed the letter. "That son of a—" "There's more." Valerie pointed to the next paragraph. "I always intended for you both to run the company together. Katie's innovation with Val's business sense, you'd be unstoppable. I'm trying to find a way to fix this. If I can't, know that I love you both equally." The letter slipped from my fingers. All these years, we'd been playing into Philip's hands, letting him tear our family apart. My phone rang. "Adrian, turn on CNBC," he said without preamble. "They're covering Philip's arrest." We rushed to my office, flipping on the TV. Philip stood in handcuffs, being led through an airport terminal. "Breaking news. International authorities have uncovered evidence of widespread fraud spanning multiple companies," the reporter announced. "Sources say Philip Sanderson manipulated corporate documents, including his former father-in-law's will. We need to go public with the letter," I said, already reaching for my phone. "Wait." Valerie caught my wrist. "There's something else you need to know first." She pulled out her phone, showing me an email from last year. It was from Philip to her, threatening to reveal her role in environmental violations if she didn't transfer more company assets to their joint accounts. "I was trying to protect Dad's legacy," she whispered. "But I just made everything worse." "You should have told me." "I know. I was ashamed. Scared." She met my eyes. "The old me would have hidden this forever. But I'm done with secrets." My phone buzzed again. Layla this time. "Have you seen the news? Holly's giving interviews, claiming she has dirt on both of you." "Let her try," I said, holding up Dad's letter. "We have the truth now." The next few hours were a whirlwind. We called Adrian and our legal team, setting up an emergency press conference. By evening, we stood together at company headquarters, facing a room full of reporters. Today we discovered evidence that proves what we've long suspected, I began, holding up the letter. Our father was coerced into changing his will through blackmail and fraud. Valerie stepped forward. I take full responsibility for my part in this. I let fear and manipulation cloud my judgment, and I hurt the person who mattered most, my sister. The questions came rapid fire. Will you press charges against Philip? What about the environmental violations? Is this why Holly's company really went bankrupt? One at a time, Adrian intervened from the sidelines. Both Ms. O'Briens will address everything. As we answered questions, I felt something shift in the room. The story wasn't just about corporate fraud anymore. It was about family, redemption, and the courage to face hard truths. Later that night, back in Dad's office, Valerie and I sat surrounded by boxes and memories. Remember when we used to sneak in here and play office? She asked, picking up his old nameplate. You always made me be the secretary. Because you had better handwriting. She laughed, then grew serious. I'm sorry, Katie, for everything. I know. I reached for Dad's sweater, draped over his chair. Here, you should have this. She shook her head. Keep it. It looks better on you anyway. My phone lit up with a news alert. O'Brien sisters unite, family legacy restored amid corporate scandal. They got it wrong, Valerie said, reading over my shoulder. The legacy wasn't restored. It's being rebuilt. Better this time. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And saw not the sister who had betrayed me, but the one who used to chase away monsters under my bed. Together? I asked. She smiled, tears in her eyes. Together? Outside, camera flashes still lit up the building entrance. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more challenges. But for now, in Dad's old office, two sisters began the real work of healing. And somewhere, I knew Dad was smiling. Ready for this? Valerie squeezed my hand as we stood outside the courthouse. Philip's sentencing was about to begin. As ready as I'll ever be. I straightened my blazer, Dad's sweater underneath giving me strength. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Holly sat in the back row, looking deflated since her failed attempt to smear our names had backfired. When Philip was let in, he barely resembled the polished businessman who'd torn our family apart. All rise, the bailiff called. As the judge read through Philip's crimes, fraud, forgery, blackmail, money laundering, I felt Valerie trembling beside me. Layla, sitting on my other side, passed her a tissue. Before I deliver the sentence, the judge announced, would the victims like to make a statement? Valerie and I approached the podium together. We'd practiced this moment, but now the words felt different. Your Honor, I began, the money Philip stole can be replaced. The companies he destroyed can be rebuilt. But he stole something far more precious, years we could have spent as a family. Valerie stepped forward. Our father died believing his daughters would hate each other forever. That's time we can never get back. Philip's face remained impassive as the judge sentenced him to 15 years. As he was led away, he turned to us with a sneer. You think this changes anything? You're still the same spoiled brats fighting over Daddy's money. No, Valerie replied calmly. We're business partners now, and we're better at it than you ever were. Outside, reporters clamored for statements. Adrian shepherded us through the crowd to where Maria waited with the car. Home? She asked, holding the door. I looked at Valerie. Actually, let's go to the office. We have work to do. In Dad's old office, now our shared space, we settled into the familiar rhythm we'd developed. Valerie reviewed acquisition proposals while I finalized our new sustainable packaging patents. Look at this, she said suddenly, pulling up an email. Holly's former employees want to join our team. They say she stole their ideas too. Hire them, I decided. All of them. We'll need the extra hands for the expansion anyway. Speaking of expansion, Valerie pulled out a familiar blueprint, Dad's original plans for an eco-friendly manufacturing facility. Remember when you first proposed this? The one Philip said would bankrupt us? Dad loved that idea. I traced the faded lines. He said it was ahead of its time. Well, now it's time. She spread out updated projections. With the new patents and tax incentives, we could break ground next quarter. Adrian knocked and entered, carrying coffee and a newspaper. Thought you should see this. The headline read, O'Brien sisters transform family crisis into environmental innovation. Not bad, Layla said, appearing behind him. But wait until they see what's next. She handed us each an envelope. Inside were invitations to the reopening of Dad's favorite children's hospital wing, now funded by our foundation and renamed in his honor. He would have loved this, Valerie whispered. The grand opening's next week, Layla continued. The mayor's coming and— Cancel the mayor, I interrupted. Instead, let's invite the kids from the pediatric ward. Make it a real party. Games, face painting, the works. Just like Dad used to do for us. Valerie smiled. Remember those birthday parties he'd throw? Complete with that horrible magic act? Hey, he practiced those tricks for weeks. We laughed, and for a moment I could almost hear Dad's booming laugh joining ours. By the way, Adrian cleared his throat. The final paperwork came through. The company's officially renamed to O'Brien Sisters Enterprise. Valerie and I exchanged glances. Actually, I said, we have a better idea. The next morning, we unveiled the new company sign together. O'Brien Family Industries, building a sustainable future. As employees gathered for the ceremony, I noticed Maria watching from the back, smiling proudly. Thank you, I whispered when I reached her, for helping me see what really needed cleaning up. She patted my arm. Family is like fine crystal. Sometimes it breaks, but with careful hands, it can be more beautiful after mending. Valerie called me over to cut the ribbon. As we stood together, scissors poised, I felt Dad's presence stronger than ever. We did it, Dad, I murmured. Not the way you planned, but maybe better. The ribbon fell, and applause erupted. Valerie hugged me tight, whispering, Think we can finally stop competing and just be sisters? I hugged her back, feeling the last pieces of resentment fall away. I think we already have. Above us, the new sign gleamed in the morning sun, promising not just a sustainable future for the environment, but for our family too. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's proving that love is stronger than hate, that truth prevails over lies, and that sisters can find their way back to each other no matter how far they've strayed.